Kumechacha, 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 Grace. Grace and Grace. I'm trying to add you, Grace, from Denver, Colorado. This is the other Grace from Philadelphia, USA. We're waiting for Grace to join our evening show. We're going to talk about sexual orientation and gender. Kumecha, waiting to add Grace and Grace from Denver, Colorado.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, Grace. Welcome to Philadelphia.
Welcome to Denver from this side of the world. Can you hear me? I hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Kumechacha.
Kumechacha.
Kumechacha hapa Denver, Colorado. I mean, Kumechacha hapa Philadelphia.
Kumechacha, Grace. Kumechacha.
Kumechacha. Nakwambia kumechacha this Sunday evening.
Kumechacha.
Life is short. We are going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I really love your earrings, Grace. Before we even get started, I'm saying the jewelry is meta-metaing. Yeah.
I know you have a weakness for jewelry. I'll send them over to you by post office.
Wow. Yeah. So, Grace, I really miss you. Kumechacha, welcome to the Diaspora Breakfast, Lunch, Dinner Show. Today we have decided, Grace, your beautiful background, us with our jewelry. But Grace, I don't know if you should show our T-shirts.
I know, I think our T-shirts will show automatically, but oh Lord, I think I'm short, but our Kumechacha T-shirts are lovely.
We should send some photos after this video wraps up so that we can share what we are wearing.
Yeah, and I love your jewelry too. I love the yellow mixed with the different colors.
Oh, thank you.
Red, black, blue. Yeah, I can see you've done a mix and match. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. So, Grace, as I said, as you're watching, we're just getting onto people's Facebook pages. Invite a friend, tune in to the show, let your people know that Kumechacha is starting now. We'll be with you between the next 45 minutes to an hour. So bring your friends closer. You know, we are here to discuss a very interesting episode today. Amani aje, Grace.
Nipo sana, Grace. We're going to discuss sexual orientation and gender. Who's a she? Who is a he? Who is a they? Who is a them? And does your opinion about it really matter? And before we even discuss that, we would like to give a disclaimer because you have to be so careful in what you say and how you say it in case you offend people. This is a complicated issue about people wanting to identify themselves in a certain way and other people demonstrating, rioting, getting upset because somebody has decided what they want to be. Yeah. So we have done a lot of research, Grace. We cannot exhaust the research that we've done, but the key takeaway while you listen to this program is being open-minded, correcting one another in love and support. And our intention should be to educate and to respect, not to mock. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we're sitting here, you know, we cannot speak from the side, or we don't have someone here who's speaking from any of these identities that we'll discuss. And so we realize what we're discussing may be very limited by what our own experiences are. And so as you're also watching this, if you have anything to add that can help our viewers, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. As Grace has said, it's a learning moment for us. And the more open that we can be, the more accepting we can be, the more of our own thoughts and other people's, the closer we can get to understanding this broad thing called sexuality. Who even knows what it is? And in this type of world, in this economy, sexuality, gender is anything, you know?
Yes, and this is not the time to catch feelings.
No. Like what feelings, Grace? What type of feelings could I catch? How am
I would not be happy if anybody caught feelings because someone came up and declared themselves or identified themselves as gay, bisexual, heterosexual, pansexual, autosexual, because these are the realities that we live in society today. And when your child comes home and says, Mom or Dad, I am autosexual, I'm attracted to myself, how are you going to respond to that?
Yeah. So let's, Grace, first of all, before we even get into it, I just want to make sure that you had a good week. And I think that one of the things that we shared in the past is what you did for self-care this week. So can you share a bit about what you did last week?
Oh, Grace. Writing is my therapy. So I
Yeah.
write for commercial purposes. I also write for therapeutic purposes. So I did
Mm-hmm.
write a lot. I was writing a poem about mother, how
Mm-hmm.
important mother is, and how
Mm-hmm.
mother is resilient, how mother needs us, but we do not really need mother.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is I watched 3 movies. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I watched 3 movies. That was wonderful. I had a family time. I always have. We watch movies together as a family, and that's really interesting, including our dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So they know that time to watch movies, they sit quietly and stare at the screen. I don't know if they understand. Yeah. Yeah. So there was a very interesting movie about the dark shadow. There's a
Mm-hmm.
dark shadow that showed up in some city and killed almost everyone, and only 6 people survived.
That sounds like a horror movie, Grace.
It wasn't horror. It gave
Uh-huh.
me inspiration that through the tough times, it's the fittest that survive.
Oh.
If you give up, a lot of people gave up in that movie and they
Uh-huh.
swept them away. The world is not gentle with people who give up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the
it's an
world can be.
encouragement rather than
Hmm.
like a scary thing.
Yeah, it's survival for the fittest. So
Oh,
that
that's
was my
nice.
self-care, just to continue, yeah, continue fighting on through life struggles. Some days are good, some days are bad, but it's never all bad or always too good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you take it one day at a time.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. How
Grace,
was
this
your self-care?
my self-care this week, I've had a hectic week, but one of my self-care has been reading. I always talked about reading as being part of that. Well, recently I'd gotten myself a library card. For those of you who don't know, it's free to get a library card. All you need to do when you go to the library, the public libraries, is show an ID of the state that you're registering in, or if you don't even
Mhm.
have an ID, you can take a letter that's addressed to you. So even if it's a bill statement or mail, and you can get a library card for free. So it's just been very nice having a continuous supply of books. And every time I get 30 minutes in the day, I just make sure that I'm reading a few chapters of the book, and that's been really good. That's been really, really good.
That's amazing. And Grace, I
Yeah.
hope you did not carry work home. I don't like people who carry work home.
Work-life balance. Grace, the last episode we talked about making changes and second change, life changes and how stressful sometimes it can be. This time
Yes.
I'm trying very much to just keep work as hard as I can, as smart as I can when I'm at work, and then try and leave that and say, well, there's nothing I'm going to do that's going to change it if I go and continue working at home. So I try
Yeah,
not to
because,
take work home.
because Grace, I attended a leadership training,
Mm-hmm.
and the CEO who was training us told us the reason why they give you those hours, whether it is 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, is because they expect you to do the work within those 5 hours. I mean 8 hours. They
Mm-hmm.
do not like people who come in to work early before the time that is expected. And they
Yeah.
don't like people who hang around after work to show that they're working more than others, because it means that you did not utilize your day well. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
reason my family is sacred, so carrying your work home, and unless it's an emergency,
Unless
really.
it's an emergency.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unless it's an
I
emergency.
I definitely agree. You
Even
have
if
an
you work,
amount of time to
mhm.
work and a certain amount of time to live the rest of your life, you know?
Yeah, even if you work from home, there still has to be a balance. Like make
Mm,
it your work time and make it your family time. You can't be going into bed carrying heavy books and files and
yeah.
squeezing yourself into bed with piles of files.
You didn't bring a desk to your bed, or Cindy.
No, your bed is not a desk.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think for those who are watching, I see a few people on the views. Feel free to share with your group, share with your pages. We're talking about sexuality, Grace, and especially talking about sexuality as Africans,
Mm-hmm.
sexuality as Kenyans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just a little bit of a background. Sexuality in African culture, in Kenyan culture, in our tribal
Mm-hmm.
culture, has most of
Mm-hmm.
the time been seen as taboo. Just discussing it, period, around the dinner table, parents would talk about sex just like don't go into that room with that boy. That was the extent of sexual education.
Yes.
But we know that in the past there have been things like unyagoni, where women and men would go into seclusion and receive training around sex and dealing with just that aspect in a mentorship capacity. There have been those things in culture. And so right today, as we're talking, we're thinking about, wow, perceptions of sex and sexuality and gender in America today, and us
Mm-hmm.
living in this type of culture where there's still these perceptions and these cultural norms that have followed us, some that we've adopted along the line, and some that
Mm-hmm.
continue to affect the way we deal with sexuality and gender today.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be some differences between the millennial and the older generation, but as
Mm-hmm.
Grace has said, we really want to explore this from a place that all of us can learn from. None of us have the true solution on what it means to be gender or what sexuality means. So, Grace,
Yes.
how do you identify? How do you identify? What's your gender?
So my gender is she, her. I
Mm-hmm,
identify as a she. As I
mm-hmm,
identify as a heterosexual woman.
mm-hmm,
So I'm she, her, hers. What
mm-hmm.
about you? What's your gender?
Well, I identify as a she, her,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as. So say she. What are we really trying to say to ourselves? That is the gender that we're asking people to know us and identify us by the gender we identify. We
Yes.
identify ourselves as she, which is feminine,
Mm-hmm.
and identity is what one's personal or internal sense is of being a man for a woman. And you'll
Yes.
see that when you say for some of us, he or she are the terms that we know of and have been familiar with. Most of the people in our society, we've just assumed if they look like a woman, then it's she. If they look like
Mm-hmm.
a man, it's he. But we have also
Mm-hmm.
started to experience transgender, where they will say that I identify as they. Wondering who is they,
Yes.
or
So
they may appear male, but they may
mm,
want to the identity, their personal identity may be a she, or someone may appear female and they may want their gender identity to be recognized as a he. So yeah, that's the first part, gender identity.
yeah, so Grace, when you're talking about gender, you're talking about social and cultural constructed roles,
Yeah.
behavior,
Mm-hmm.
activities and attributes that are given that society gives,
Mm-hmm.
considering it appropriate for men and women. So that's gender.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But when you're talking of gender identity, you're talking of one's internal, personal sense of being a man or a woman, as you've said. And
Mm-hmm.
for transgender people, their own internal gender identity does not match the sex with which you're
Yeah.
born. So in a
Yeah.
lot of cultures, when someone is born, the doctor decides that, oh, you're male, you're female, or you are intersex, or they
Mm-hmm.
used to call it hermaphrodite, but the scientific word right now is intersex. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the official word that's allowed is intersex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
mm,
when we talk about gender, that
mhm,
brings us, if gender is being defined as the social and cultural roles, that means that
mhm,
depending on the culture, the gender
mm,
may be associated with one thing or the other. You may find that, just if someone has been assigned a female at birth, their
mhm,
gender their gender becomes the roles and the socially and culturally that the culture defines for them to do. So that's why you find that in a lot of there's been a pervasive culture of like girls only wear pink, as only supposed to wear pink. Men cannot play with toys.
mhm,
Women are supposed to be the 100% in the kitchen. Men are supposed to be a 100% hustling and going out there. Some of that has been a part of our culture. Some of that has been a part of the culture that we have learned, but it is by no means the definitive of the definition of how people should be. There's some
mm,
cultures out there that are where women are the one who run kingdoms. There have been cultures out there where women are not allowed in the kitchen because they believe that the kitchen is a male's place, is a male's domain. So depending on the culture, the roles of the gender depend. So who's to say that your son cannot wear a dress? There have been a lot of, especially here in America, you see a lot of discourse around my son wants to wear a dress, and that should be okay. That does not negate his gender identity if he chooses to be a man. But if we say, gender is socially and culturally constructed, then some things that even men used to wear high heels, by the way, before it became fashionable to women, high heels were only worn by richer men. And when women started wearing heels, it started being known as a female thing. But men wore high heels, wore those wigs, the wigs that people wear to law court. That's what was seen as a sign of male status. Whereas now, if you see a woman in a wig, there's this if you see a man in a wig, there's a negative perception nowadays of men in wigs. So
So,
gender can vary very much.
when you talk of cultural practices, and you talked about a woman's place in the kitchen, well, during my time when I grew up, a woman's place was in the kitchen, and you could see women working hard in the fields. You could see a woman fetching water in the river with a child on her back, another child in front, and three other children trailing her. Should be making food, doing all cleaning the compound, harvesting, and the men would be sitting under the trees. So the men would be waiting for dinner. So the men were supposed to be hunters, and they said a woman's place was in the kitchen. Some men have carried that up to now, even though culture evolves with time. There's some cultural practices that we used to follow closely, but with time have faded off because they are no longer relevant to the society. I also remember when we were in school, they used to encourage us not to do mathematics. They said if you did mathematics, then you'd go to high school and you'd not get a husband. So a woman was supposed to be dumb. Think of, they used to say dumb blonde or dumb, like don't try to be too clever. And in some cultures, they also advise a woman not to be too wise. Like don't show your husband or your boyfriend that you know stuff. Like just act very, very foolish, and then you'll get married. So the culture can be useful, but it can also be redundant.
So when you talk about, we've talked about gender, we've talked about what gender identity is, which is one's personal sense of self. Grace, I think, in my workplace or the places that we've worked in, they have been very aware of that idea. And get into tips for you as you're coming in and you're coming into a new culture where LGBTQ rights are taken very seriously. Sometimes in people's email and on my email signature, actually, I write my name and then I write my preferred pronoun so that people write or address you, they have a sense of how you prefer to be called. So I'd write my email and write she, her, and hers. Or if I'm speaking to someone and I'm not sure or I don't want to take the risk that I know that they are a he or they're she, I would ask them, hello, what is your preferred gender pronoun? Not to assume that I know what it is, but as part of respecting that exchange, that recognizing that people may look one thing but may identify completely differently is important. Intersex people, like Grace, if you go back a little bit, intersex people, or Grace had mentioned in a past term that's been used has been the hermaphrodite. It is referred to individuals who are born with sex characteristics such as genitals or chromosomes that do not fit the typical definitions of male and female. This is a biological thing that happens. You can have, that's when sometimes doctors can decide for better or for worse what the name, the gender of the certificate. They'll have someone who may probably have male, they may look like they have a bigger male organ, and then they choose to classify them as a male. But as the person achieves puberty, they realize that internally what their hormones or how they identify is actually a female. And so there have been a lot of issues in courts here and there, and especially in Kenyan courts when it talks about the rights of people to change their certificates, to change their IDs, so that even though they may present one way that was assigned to them, they want to have the right to determine what type of information about them shows up on a certificate. And Grace, you had some more information about that, the rights of intersex individuals in Kenya.
So the rights of intersex individuals in Kenya is more tolerant than to people who are gay, gays or lesbian, to the rest of the LGBT community. But because in Kenya, although they do not allow, it is forbidden, actually, it's against the law to be gay. But even for the trans people, it's still against the law, but the government allows them, the constitution allows them to change their names, in the birth certificate. But for the others, it's considered a crime. You can be jailed up to 5 years, or you can say spend about a life imprisonment in jail. Yes.
That's when you talk about the others, are people who are caught uh, doing unnatural sexual acts, or how do they describe that code?
Yeah, they call it an unnatural sexual acts. They call it sodomy. But before we go to that, Grace, let us remember that in the African culture, although they say that being gay is not an African culture, it was there in the African culture.
Yeah.
And remember, you talk extensively about how different African communities used specific words to identify intersex, to identify people who are gay. Even in our own Luo community, they had a word for it, which was nyot gat. For someone who was a hermaphrodite or an intersex, they had a word for it. And in a lot of Luo folktales, especially from the Nubian Hills in the Sudan, there's a story about someone called Atum, who features in every folktale along the way, who was a hermaphrodite or an intersex. So we cannot say that it did not exist, that gayism did not exist in the African community. Again, in
Yeah.
a lot of African communities, especially in West Africa, anybody who was born with both the female and male genitalia was treated as either as a curse, and they killed them. They asked the birth attendant mothers to kill them, or they hid them. But in places like India and some parts of West Africa, they were treated as gods, and they were moved immediately to the temples and the shrines because they were believed to have very special abilities. They were believed to be very intelligent. And in some societies that still practice that, any child who is born with both sexes is moved into a shrine or a temple and worshipped as a god. Yes.
Yeah. The presence of non-heterosexual relations or relationships, like you said, Grace, has existed. They've had several roles, whether it be, they've been held as a caste. The same way, like we've known about, the same way people regard intersex people, they have been cast, but as well looked as gods. There has been, in the Yoruba language, there's a word for homosexual, that it's not something that is, it may sound insulting or derogatory. Then the term that is used is adofuro. But the point is that there's a word for behaviors like this. How far can you go in your language? Language is one of the oldest things that carry across from time. If there's a language, if there's a term that exists there, you know that it has had time in the community to sit with people so that people can see how they can organize themselves around it, whether for good or for bad.
Yes.
In Ethiopia, there's the word ashtime refers to youth lived in the home of their leaders who would do duties that were associated with women. And so that I think, kind of talks about how gender roles, how people identified, was not necessarily defined by their sex, that people could carry various roles that were not associated with traditional male roles. I would encourage you. They also talk about the Ankole in Uganda, that they talk about a woman to dress as a man and therefore could become an oracle to the god Mukasa. That's an instance of talking about how the trans, whether it's transgender or transsexuality, those have existed and they've had roles. In Kenya and Tanzania, there's a term called shoga or mashoga, and this has been used to talk about people who fall along the gender gay on the gender continuum, and or either there are people men who would adopt the female gender or assigned characteristics early in birth, early in life, but they assume special roles in their communities, and so those names exist, and those terms exist as a result. So Grace, as we're talking about this, the first thing I think, Grace, the point was we wanted to drive home is, so when we talk about LGBTQ, and we'll talk about the definitions in some of those terms, one of the major things that people put up against people talking about are there, did African culture have, non-heterosexual people living there? And the answer is yes, they did. If we say that these behaviors are Western, the answer is no. You know, they existed before. It's not an import of white people who brought it into
No,
the.
they did not come with Western colonization.
Yes, and so
Yeah,
as
we
much
had gay
as
people in
yeah,
our communities. We had gay people in our communities. Yes.
exactly,
And we had the
exactly.
words. And we had the words and they had roles to play.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so even if we're talking about this, the idea of using that term to 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 minimize the voice of someone who's African, who's talking about the identity in that way by saying that
Mm.
they're being African, that they're just adopting a Western ideal, is really very far from the truth. So let's just
Mm-hmm.
start facing it and getting our own understanding on what that is. As we said, there's some cultural traditions that, for example, Grace, you were talking about the group of midwives who came together to save the lives of intersex children, because in the past, being intersex may have carried a lot of health conditions, and the midwives may have chose to remove to kill. But
Mm-hmm.
now culture changes. People are
Mm.
taking a different take, are having different ideals on what it means to truly be an ally or support people who don't fall in that umbrella.
Yes, Grace, I think it was a beautiful documentary by the BBC. Maybe we can post it on our website later for those who would like to watch. That certain midwives in Western Kenya were killing children who were born intersex.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a known thing and an accepted thing amongst the community. And the mother or the father of the born child would not have a say. So
Mm-hmm.
if the mother immediately had a child and the child had both organs,
Mm-hmm.
the midwife would come and report that they had crushed the sweet potato because they used the head of the sweet potato to crush the child's head. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
recently, one of the midwives decided that she was not going to do that, and she convinced the other midwives to ensure that when the children are born, they rescue them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the
Mm-hmm.
the midwife got an award, and this group of midwives called, I think they're called Daughters of Eve, they have decided that any child that is born with both sexes, any child that is a hermaphrodite, as the doctors call it, or intersex, as we call it socially, will not be killed. They will adopt these children and give them an opportunity to be part of the society. But
Mm-hmm.
throughout the ages, in a lot of African communities, they did that. They killed a child that was born. They said it was a stillbirth. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
mothers today, I hear them saying, "Oh, I've had 3 or 4 children. I had a stillbirth." It was not a stillbirth sometimes. In a number of cases, it was a child born intersex.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a really sad story, but I'm glad that
Mm-hmm.
there's even within the homes and the villages, that there's awareness and there's people out there that are willing to go against tradition in order to save someone's life, especially as we're thinking today around opportunities that exist around health. If it's health issues, if there's more acceptance that there are people who exist and they have rights, then it makes it more attractive for people to consider, wow, I'm not raising a child or bringing a child into the world for whom society does not have a place for, because that can be really damaging.
And
So
Grace,
yeah.
I just want that just reminds me at this point. I told you in our earlier conversation that I was as a journalist, I used to love all these beautiful hairstyles. And my hairdresser for about 20 years was someone who was intersex. He had both sexes. And
Mm-hmm.
he could make the best ever hairstyle that you can ever imagine. He made
Mm-hmm.
hairstyles for people who are going for the world contests, beauty contests, whatever you may call it. He used to work at Urembo Studios. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Urembo Beauty Salon. I
Where was
remember
that?
him.
Nairobi?
Urembo was somewhere. Okay, I've not been in Kenya for many years, but Urembo was somewhere near.
Avenue.
What's that big hotel? That big hotel near the University of Nairobi.
Oh, maybe
Karen,
someone can.
where are you? Tell me where Urembo Studios is.
Someone help Grace out. Me, I don't know where
Urembo,
around.
yeah, Urembo. Urembo is near wow. It's near the University of Nairobi though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It used to be somewhere on not Mfangano. No, no, Mfangano is down. Grace, I'm ashamed.
Oh
Yeah, but
no. Hey, if I start calling
Urembo,
myself, I do a boutique.
Urembo Beauty Salon was one of the best. It was run by my friend Nancy. It was really
Okay.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the boy, the hermaphrod, the intersex boy went to the UK for asylum because
Mm-hmm.
of mistreatment where he lived. in, I think he lived around Woodley, where he lived. People discriminated against him. They ostracized him. They looked at him in a certain way, but he was so, so gifted. Yeah.
So, Grace, as we're talking
Okay,
about the
Grandma was somewhere near on Koinange Street.
on Koinange Street. Oh,
Yes,
finally.
yes. And that's where I met the Koinange Street women and wrote an article about them at Florida,
Wow.
up the stairs, Florida Casino. Yeah.
Koinange, the famous street in Nairobi.
Yes.
So, Grace, I think this is a good time for us to, first of all, thank you for everyone who's watching in, who's joining. If you have any
Thank
questions,
you.
put the comments. Grace, I think you have control of that comment board, so keep an eye out for us there if anyone is commenting.
Okay.
But Grace, let's before we get into maybe a little bit of tips for you and things like that, some acronyms that you should know. Defining what the terms LGBTQIA plus
Yeah.
mean. It's not just LGBTQ plus, LGBT. There's a lot of characters.
There's a
So,
lot of characters. Yes, Grace.
so we'll just start with LGBT. Lesbian is a woman who has enduring romantic or emotional attraction to other women.
Mm.
Gay refers to people who have attractions to people of the same sex. The word gay is commonly used to describe men who are gay, who are attracted to the same sex. But it can also, there are some women who may refer to themselves as gay women. The gay term is really more of an umbrella term for same-sex attraction. We talk about bisexual as a person who has the capacity to form enduring physical, romantic, or emotional attractions to those of the same gender or some of another gender. So when someone says they're bisexual, and that means they're attracted to either men and women, or transgender, or they have ability to be attracted to one or the other person. A transgender person, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. There's transgender are people who have an identity, that's how they identify themselves, or the way they express it is different from what they would be from what is typically associated with what they were assigned with at birth. So they could have been assigned a female, but their identity or the way they express themselves, whether through the roles or the dress or things that are physically visible, is different from what they're assigned at birth. Whether if it's a she and they identify that and they have those physical attributes or the expressions in their dress or whatever, then that's how you would describe that person as transgender. They do not identify or express the gender that they were assigned at birth. This is not dependent on whether they have done what they called is gender confirmation procedures. You'll find that there's some people who choose to I think the term in the past was gender reassignment, but there are some people who want to look the way that they feel. And so if they've started out as a man, then they will either take hormonal medication, or they will go through the process of either removing their physical parts or maybe removing their Adam's apple, so that they continue to feel like the procedures help them confirm the gender that they feel. But that does not mean if someone has decided to not do that they are not transgender. So that's why you find a wide people that identify different ways and they look different ways. There's some women who will choose to continue to identify as women, but will choose to have beards and things like that. So, or they can choose to say that they are, but not do anything to their body. So the continuum varies on how transgender people choose to identify and express themselves with their body. Yeah. Grace, so we've talked about LGBT, other sexualities and gender identities.
That's so great. It was interesting during my research to find that there are about 312 gender identifications, 312, and 84 sexualities. So the ones that I picked that are like the gender person's Bible, like you have the short Bible, the big Bible, like a dictionary you can carry around with the 16 types.
All Gideon size.
Yeah, the Gideon-sized Bible, like the one-page gender dictionary.
Okay.
Which you can carry. I found the 16 types very interesting. I watched it in a video. And this is not necessarily the truth, but this is how someone decided. The person who came up with this dictionary or this list called himself a misfit, like in a funny way. He was making fun of himself, but he did intensive research. And now these are the 16 hottest gender items or gender identification items in the market in the US. So there's gay, which is a male attracted to another male. Lesbian, female attracted to another female. Bisexual is a person attracted to both male, to either male or female. Heterosexual or straight is someone attracted to the opposite sex. And bi-curious is a straight person, but questioning their feelings. They're not sure whether they're attracted to the male or the female sex, so they're still bi-curious. Pansexual, as you said, is attracted to anyone and everyone. Asexual is someone who is not attracted to anyone. And then we have demisexual, which is it's someone who is asexual, except in occasional circumstances when they might want to be attracted to someone. And then we have gray A, like A for apple, gray A, which is someone who has no sexual attraction, but occasionally craves for sex, like the way you crave for ice cream or water ice.
Once a month or twice a year.
Once a year. Then we have androgynosexual. Androgynosexual, which is this is women who are attracted to other women with feminine features, because there are women who have masculine features. These ones are only attracted to women with feminine features. And then I was looking at androsexual, which is let me see. Grace, I did my research.
I see.
Which these are people who are attracted to women with masculine features.
Okay.
They don't like women who look like men or who have male features. They only like who have female features. They only like women who have male features. And then we have gynosexual, which is someone attracted to female with okay, I've already said gynosexual is this confuses me, Grace, but this is a heterosexual who's attracted to female who has no feminine features. I'll let that pass. Heterosexual is
we talked about,
but not.
We already talked about heterosexual.
Oh, we did talk about heterosexual. Then homoflexible. A homoflexible is a gay person attracted to female of the opposite sex, but they're not bisexual. They don't consider themselves bisexual.
That's interesting.
Yes, it is. And then there's scaliosexual. That is someone who's attracted to non-binary people only. And they use the non-binary people who use gender neutral tones. So this is a man or a woman who is attracted to only people who are non-binary. And then finally we have autosexual, which is someone sexually attracted only to themselves. Only themselves. They're not attracted to anyone else except they're in love with themselves. They identify with themselves and they're attracted to themselves. So these are the 16 hottest, newest, or rather acceptable. These are the terms that when you're interacting with the people in the gay community, you need to be sensitive to, and you need to, I have to practice this more because I just came across it a few days ago. You can see I still get a little confused when it comes to andro and gyno. Yeah, but I will learn with good time.
You know, andro I think is like male and gyno is female. So if you see anything NDR as sexuality refers to male, and gyno, just because of gynecology, refers to something dealing with female. So that
the andro is a man who is attracted to someone with masculine features. Women with masculine features, or a man with masculine features. Yeah, that's clear now. Yes.
And Grace, I don't know if you mentioned this, but a pansexual is a person who can be attracted to different kind of people, regardless of their sexuality or their gender identity. So pansexual is someone who's like, if I'm attracted to you, it doesn't matter how you identify, I'm attracted to you, and that's it.
So the misfit calls it attracted to anyone and everyone. We don't say this is the perfect definition, But that's how he describes it.
Yes, and there's also
Yeah.
the within that spectrum. There's the ally, someone who may not necessarily fall under each of those identities, but someone who is taking up a position of being a support, of
Yes,
being an
yes.
advocate,
And these are
of
the
being.
most important people in this whole process. Being an ally
Mm,
rather than the enemy or someone making life difficult for people who
mm,
identify differently. Being an
mhm,
ally is the most important aspect of this discussion.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, you're either in it or you're either supporting it or it's none of your business. Just stay out.
Yeah. Grace,
Yeah.
can you talk more about how the perceptions, especially how it's looked like in Kenya, and before we talk about some of the real life prejudices and real life impacts of people who identify as LGBTQ plus? Kenya has had a lot of, secretaries making statements,
Mm-hmm.
the criminalization of sexual acts and natural sexual acts has been part of Africa's bills, from
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not Mudavi, sorry, Museveni, kind of just calling open death for people who are practicing homosexuality.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you talk more about, what it's like being non-heterosexual, non-straight in Kenya, really?
Yes. So the perceptions, Kenya versus USA, gayism in Kenya is identified through an investigative report on homosexuality, which was released in June 2017 to Education Cabinet Minister Fred Matiang'i, says that gayism in Kenya starts in primary schools, with girls writing love notes to fellow girls, girls behaving like men, they say, girls who have funny hairstyle and indecent behaviors, such as girls touching other girls' private parts, pairing and constantly sharing beds and holding hands. This is according to this report.
Mm-hmm.
While gay boys were noted to share gifts and beds, and the gay boys were also noted in primary school to be discomfortable in the company of feminine characters, and that a lot of gay boys in the lower primary school already possessed condoms. And you know how difficult it is to access condoms in Kenya, in
Mm-hmm.
the rural areas especially. But these gay boys were found to have condoms in the schools.
And Grace, what you were saying is that even in the village, this is not something that you can say, oh, these are just, Nairobi children, or these are just rich kids who have been
No,
exposed,
they
all
have
these. I mean,
never had access to the internet, to the phone, to Facebook, or to any such stuff. And that
mm-hmm,
raises the question of when they say that gayism is inherited, or rather that gayism is a peer influence, where did these young boys who are in poverty come up with the gay tendencies that are
mm-hmm,
identified in this report? And I do not know if this report can be verified as what is really gay in their terms. This is what they came up with in Kenya, that gay
mm-hmm,
boys were very possessive friendships. They did not allow you to be friends with another boy in the class. If they were your friend, you are going to be their friend throughout primary school until closing day. If they saw you talking to another boy, they would get very jealous. And
mm-hmm.
also that there was sagging trousers. I don't know if sagging trousers is an example of gayism, but I'm just reading the report. I'm
Yeah,
acting
that's
as
how
fact.
they
I do not want to give my opinion at this stage. I'm just giving a report that was done because of the high increase in gayism and lesbianism in Kenya. And
mm-hmm,
that the gay boys were found to be very shy, but yet very friendly, that they gave unnatural tendency behaviors. And the report also says that gay students are usually absent-minded, lack concentration in class, and
I
I'm
don't
sorry
know
to laugh, but
who did
this
this
sounds
study.
ridiculous.
Who did
I don't know who
this
did this
study?
report. It was done by the Ministry of Information. But they say that gay students are absent-minded, lack concentration. This is
I'm
in
just
class,
laughing
and
because I want to
I
read
think
the
this is
report.
very offensive. This is very offensive and are very secretive. So just to continue with a little bit with the report, so that was on the gays, boys. And then lesbianism in Kenyan schools rose to a high alarm in 2018, very high alarm. So in April 27, lesbianism in Kenyan schools is at a high alarm. It's gone very high, very, very high. So that's the position in Kenya. And
Mm-hmm,
in April 27, 2018, Kenya banned the first Kent Festival film. You remember the film? I think it was called Rafiki. Someone may correct me. because it says that under the Kenyan constitution, it does not recognize any relationship between persons of the same sex. And that this film was teaching Kenyans bad behavior and training them to become lesbians by watching the movie. So it was banned. And in May 24, 2019, the High Court of Kenya refused an order to declare Section 162 and 165 as constitutional. It remained unconstitutional. So what does Section 162 of the Penal Code say, Grace? That sodomy is a felony punishable by 14 years imprisonment. And any sexual practices between males is called gross indecency, and a random penalty under Section 165, punishable by 5 years imprisonment. So if you have sex, a relationship, or you have sex with another man, or a woman has sex with another woman, 5 years imprisonment. So there's no explicit protections against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. So Kenya is still very strict, and you can see the kind of posts on Facebook or on the internet from Kenyans about gays. Yeah, very.
You don't even need to go far. You know, it's either implied, you know, or you just hear how people talk about it. It's still very much a taboo. Grace, we were talking about, I was sharing with you that in the past 10 years of Facebook within my age group, a lot of people have, either being in the US or even in Kenya itself, have come out of the closet, in the terms of they've come out and been open about their relationships and been open about their experiences, being gay, transgender. There's been a lot of conversations that's starting in Kenya around people themselves, around sexuality. Binyavanga Wainaina, who's an author, a famed Kenyan author who recently passed away, was openly gay.
And he talked about a very good friend of mine, yes, a great author. And you know, they recognized him in the Philadelphia Daily News. Daily News gave him a big page, gave him some space to celebrate him.
Yeah. In addition to, you know, he's one person who's talked about the idea of Africans starting to own our own stories, our own identities. He's been one of the authors who've written satirical pieces around how Westerners talk about Africa. But he's one of the big voices in the gay movement for rights in Kenya and really much of Africa, as someone who, you know, kind of talking about openly, and writers are so important because your voice is so big when you talk, and those experiences are so important. So Grace, as we're about it's 4:50 right now, it's helpful for us to talk about, even though we always talked about America being the land of opportunity, being the land of second chances. Some people have had to seek asylum in these in the US, and like you said, your friend, your hairstylist in the UK, for freedom. There's still a lot of prejudices that people who identify LGBTQ continue to face. We've talked about those extreme cases in Kenya, such as death and murder, but there are a lot of things that are still negative impacts for people who identify as LGBTQ. We talked about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so in addition to just straight up, you know, sanctioned murder and violence against these people, there's a lot of family isolation that can happen. I think that's one of the most scary places to be. A lot of people don't identify or come out of the closet, as they say, which is coming out of the closet is being open about your sexuality. There's a lot of family isolation, threats of being, you know, cast away. A lot of people have been homeless. Have been kicked out of their family home because they've not been accepted. There's a social stigma and prejudice associated with that. Let's say you go and, you know, someone says that you're a man and you have feminine traits. There's a lot of stigma that can appear around that. You can get discriminated upon because of just how you look, even before you open your mouth and say anything.
I was
Yeah.
talking about the trip that I took to Roxborough in the bus, and the driver was very well dressed in a sector uniform, and they had this nice weave, and I assumed just because they looked like a woman that they were women. So I was like, "Oh, thank you, ma'am," when I was alighting, and he told me, "No, I'm not a man. I'm a man. I'm a he." So I apologized quickly and left, but he was very gracious about it. But talking of the discrimination that happens right here in America, especially among the intersex or among people identifying as trans male or trans female, the big example is that of the bathroom. And I was just hearing from one trans male this morning talking about how a lot of intersex people have the agony of going to the bathroom. You know, if they go to a bathroom for the where it's written disabled, then they feel they're taking up the space that is not meant for them because being intersex is not a disability. But sometimes they are forced to do that. But when a lot of intersex people do not want to go to the bathrooms because of discrimination, so they wait all day and hold that urine in their bladder, and they end up, there's a high cases of UTIs, urinary tract infections. A lot of intersex people are currently in hospital with catheters, bladder infection, kidney infection, and dialysis because they would rather not be discriminated against than use public bathrooms.
And Grace, I want to note that intersex and transgender people are very two different identities of
Oh,
people.
okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, I meant trans. I meant trans female. Yeah, not intersex. Yeah.
But I think the issue of bathrooms can affect both people. If an intersex person, they may be having an organ that they need to use that is associated with a particular washroom, but they appear to be the other one, then that's a problem for them because they don't want to inspire that fear. They want to feel that they want to go to the bathroom
Yes.
without having to have that question, should I or should I not? The same with someone who's a transgender who may want to use the bathroom because that's how they express and they identify, but their physicality may put them even in a place of lack of safety. So yeah, it's really, really it can be a big question. In Philadelphia, a couple of years ago, when they used to hand out passes, those monthly passes, they would have signs of whether person they would have on the card whether the person who was holding the pass was male or female, and that was very left out a huge amount of people who were transgender, and they didn't look like male, didn't look like female, and they didn't want to have a pass that forced them to make a decision, especially if SEPTA was not allowing. What if you're not male? What if you're not female? What are they going? Are they not going to give you a tick? They didn't give you a pass if you didn't tell them what gender you were, so that they could put the.
Yeah, we just want to recognize at this time that a lot of people who are gay, especially in the activism movement, whether it was HIV or any other kind of movement, a lot of the privileges we get today, access to medication, access to Medicaid, access to medical care, was because of them standing in the front line and fighting for these rights. So even as you discriminate against people, you should also, you should reflect back and say, these people fought for what we gain today. Yeah. So they're not evil, as you say. They're not. They stand to be respected. And at this point, we really want to appreciate allies who have joined in this fight to help people, to support people who want to identify the way they are. Yeah. And one privilege that they have here in the US, which we do not have in Kenya, is that they allow people to have same mom, same dads. They allow gay people to adopt children. That is still forbidden in Kenya. It's against the law.
Yeah. So as you even couple that with the way social services is starting to look at the perceptions of having same-sex parents, I've babysat for people for families that are same-sex, and what verifies that a child should be brought up by a man and a woman. That flies in the face of maybe some of the cultural perceptions that we have around what family means. So if you're going there and you're taking your kids to school and your kids have parents, and your kid will probably come and talk about, mommy, my friend has two mummies or my friend has two daddies. That's a right that's protected. You have no right to go there and talk about, they're corrupting my children, take them away from the school. There is no evidence basis that, being LGBT is contagious. There's no science out there that talks about those things being like that. So
Yes.
as part of being a part of American culture, or some of these cultures in which being LGBT has been decriminalized, or same-sex marriage is upheld, and same-sex partnerships are becoming normal, you also have to be aware that it is part of culture, and you'll experience people along the way that are not, one man, one woman, one child.
Yes. So Grace, as we come to the end, we have like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
As we come to the end of the show, of our show, Kumechacha, you can see Kumechacha. It's hot right
Kumechacha.
here. Yeah,
Oh
it's
my.
Kumechacha. So
Kumechacha.
Kumechacha. So everybody can be a good ally. Ask people what their pronoun is. Ask what they want to be identified as. If you can't tell if whether they're she, he, refer to them by their names. Yeah. If you mistake someone and call them a she when they're a he, or call them a he when they're a she, or call them a she when they're they, just apologize and move on. Don't go dwelling like, oh, I'm sorry, what happened? Like, why do you want to know what happened? Yeah. Go, if you want to know what happened, go watch a movie. And then don't be disrespectful to someone when they share a bathroom with you. Yeah, when that's not your personal bathroom. Of course, they will respect your space, but remember that there are a lot of people having UTIs because they're afraid to come to the bathroom. And avoid speculations. Don't say, oh, if these people come to our bathrooms, they will rape us. Tell us who they raped, where, when, and how. Do not use one incident to generalize about everybody. It's like saying, oh, illegal immigrants have been murdering people, so we are all, dangerous, Yeah, that's a fallacy. So, Grace, what are your last words as we end Kumechacha this evening?
I think one of the few words I want to say is that it's important for us to know our history. Important to know our history as Africans. Read into the articles. Don't take them with a word of salt. We can share some of them here, but the idea is for you to not feel like this is an indoctrination session. The idea for us to open a line of dialogue, and hopefully you can pursue that by doing your own research. But recognizing that some of the beliefs that we hold around people who are LGBTQIA+, may be influenced by some of the either pervasive cultural traditions for which society has deemed as this is not fair, this is not human rights, or well held together by aspects of colonialism that have framed a lot of the thinking that we hold around people that are not heterosexual or are straight, have that straight identity. So I'd like to say, do your work, do your research before you point out the log in your neighbor's eye or the speck in your neighbor's eye. Recognize that you may have a speck in yours. And if you're going back to the idea of religion, religion has been used to condemn people, especially but there's if you look in maybe some of the Christian religious texts, when it goes all the way at the beginning of creation, was that everyone was created in God's image. So who are we to, and God deemed everything as good, so who are we to stand and talk about how other people come out, how other people identify, just because it's not our own? Who are we to stand and judge how people live and how people choose to live their lives? So yeah, just some food for thought.
So, Grace, thank you. It was a wonderful session. All we can say is Kumechacha, treat everybody the way you'd want to be treated. Si Kumechacha, Grace.
Kumechacha.
Kumechacha kweli. Kumechacha. Kumechacha. See you 2 weeks from now, Sunday, 6 p.m. Thank you. Bye.
Every other Sunday.
Every other Sunday. Thank you, viewers, for watching and staying with us through this hot Kumechacha session. See you soon.
See you. Bye.
Bye.